I love this quilt. I have it next to my bed. It is so beautiful. It's 14 by 11. And today, this pattern is free on our website. It will be free until the end of September 2023. It's available for you after I teach you how to do it in this video. The embroidery is just something I made up, and I won a blue ribbon at the fair. It was made to be a doll quilt. I, however, use it next to my bed as a nightstand cover because I love it and it matches my bedroom so beautifully. This original one I made out of scraps that I had left over, and so today I'm going to teach you how to make this quilt using other scraps that I own now. We're going to call it Descending Squares. I chose 17 colors of animal prints and beautiful scraps that went with those animal prints. All of these are from scraps that I happen to have. In the original one, I have 2 borders, but in this one, I'm going to have a 3.5-inch border, which I will show you. And I have to use scraps, so it's going to be multiple fabrics. And then instead of doing embroidery, I'm just going to have that beautiful black inner border. This pattern also works with yardage, so whatever you have in whatever colorway you want will work. I'm going to show you a bright colorway also. And so here are some brights that I chose. With these fabrics, I'll do a short demo at the end, and I'll talk about color and color balance and color scraps, so you'll want to stick around for that. These colors are just bright and happy. To make the center of the quilt, I take each of these scraps and I just put the longest length going the way they are. They're all different sizes, so it doesn't really matter. What my goal is to get 18 inches total, and I'm going to have way more than that, so I'm not very worried. I cut them each at 1.5 inches, and then I sorted them. I have 2 pieces of each fabric, except for the really short one. Of the really short one, I made 3 because I'm going to seam it, and I'll show you that in a minute. But I'm just laying them out right now with their friend so that there's 2 of each one, and now I'm going to move them. This is the fun part, and we have me in top speed doing it. It really is fun to decide what you want to put next to what, because with this one you want there to be a variety, and right now I'm changing busier ones with less busy ones because I had all the less busy ones over to one side. So I'm just making the colors feel pleasing to me, and there's not a right or wrong. This is going to bother some of you, but you just do it. That's the one with the seam. I'm going to pretend it doesn't have a seam. After you get the arrangement so that you like how they're arranged, it's time to pin the strip sets together. And I pin one next to the other, next to the other, next to the other, and get them ready to sew. And that way I won't mix them up and I won't have to unpick, because you know me, I like to pin. Here we go. That one is ready. I'm going to get the second one ready, and then I will start sewing these together. It's really fun when you work in small sizes because the project goes together pretty quickly. Before I get going, I want to show you how I make my thread saver. I take a piece, I like it folded in, mostly because I don't like to sew across raw edges. This goes by thread saver and a million other names, but the name I prefer to call it is thread saver, and we're going to need this when we're working with small fabrics especially. It's important to sew them straight from fabric to fabric so that your thread doesn't get caught underneath. Okay, time to sew these together. We're going to turn it around and sew this way so that as I sew, the fabric will travel happier with what I'm sewing. You want to, this is so tricky. I want to say you want 1/4 inch because that would be good. However, if you're consistent with yourself, these are squares and they're really small squares, but being consistent is the most important thing here, which is going to be really funny because I'll show you how this works out. It's kind of hard to sew with a camera in my face, and so I'm not using my normal muscle memory, so I had a hard time making this even for me, and I'll show you what I do about that when we get to it. I sewed the colorful one that I show at the end without the camera, and it's much more accurate. So really what I'm saying is you want to be as accurate as possible. Notice I put my thread saver in, I start a new seam, I sew from the thread saver onto the seam of the strip, and then as I get to the bottom of it, I take the thread saver, I cut the thread, and I move it to the top. This way the thread never gets caught underneath. So if you've never used a thread saver, then try it. You'll become a convert, and if you already know, you already know. So you don't need me to tell you. You probably have your own favorite way to make thread savers. Now it's time to press. and I turn it up, and then I give it a little tug. Now, I'm not distorting it, I'm opening it so that the seams are flat, and I do it very carefully. This is really something to become good at. You want to press the seams really, really well. And then I turn it over. It's already been pressed. All the seams are going the right direction. And I just make sure they're really open well. So that's what you see me doing here. After both strip sets are sewn and pressed, I'm ready to cut. I'm cutting 1.5 inch strips. So the strip sets are 1.5 inch. They're really, really teeny. And I cut them as accurately and carefully as I can. You can see the seam right there. There it is. And I'm just going to pretend it's not there. It's right in the middle of the block. So it worked out perfectly. I need to get a total of 11 of these, and then we'll be set and ready to make our center. To lay out the center, you take one strip set and lay it out. That's going to be the guide. And then the others we sew into tubes, end to end, top end to bottom end, and we just sew all 10 of them. So a seam on each one, the same as the others. Here they are. You can cut them with scissors, or you can use your rotary cutter, whatever you think is fast. This is really the fun part, and I like to do this right here so that I don't get confused. I put the bottom two there and I cut between them, and I'll show you this several times, so just watch and you'll see the pattern start to develop. I take it, I find the two that are at the bottom, and I go right above that bottom one. I go between the two, and that's how I know the bottom goes now to the top and that other one goes down, and it just makes the pattern beautifully. So there it is again, and you'll notice me not trimming. I like to rip my seams. I know some of you are cringing, but it works as long as you support it with your fingers. So here we go making this, and the whole thing is just this, and you won't get confused if you check every time and then rip between those two bottom ones. So this is how you lay out the quilt. And it really is just beautiful, simple. You can make this quilt in any size. I have made big quilts. I've made twin size quilts. I've made baby quilts. Just get out some graph paper, graph out the blocks, decide how many fabrics you want to use. And this is a really, really fun quilt no matter what size you decide to make it. Here I'm putting numbers on them because I want to go press them so that they will sew together well. I'm pressing these, and I only need to press the even ones because the odd ones are already pressed the direction they belong. So for the even ones, I'm pressing towards the number because the odds, of course, go away from the odds. So I'm pressing towards the even and getting those ready, and then we'll be able to sew them together and they'll interlock. Here's the first one I sewed, and you can see the seams going back and forth just like they're supposed to. I've decided to pile these in order because I'm just going to grab one and sew it onto the main piece one at a time. That way I can make sure not to get anything backwards or confused. I like to press every single one because it makes me feel like I can see if I'm getting off anywhere or doing anything that doesn't work. I'm pointing out to you that it's not perfect. This isn't about sewing something perfect. Notice I'm taking the numbers off. They're annoying me. These pieces are so little they feel like they're in my way. But I'm leaving them on, checking that it's the next one before I sew it on. So I'm still glad I labeled them just for pressing and for checking to make sure it's the right one. Plus you can see the pattern really clearly. So just double check before you sew to make sure you're sewing the correct one on. Again, I like to press every single strip piece as I sew it to the main piece. When you're sewing little, it's really hard for it to be perfect. So cut yourself some slack and just do the best you can and call it good. If you've never sewn with such teeny pieces before, it's really fun, but it's only fun if you decide not to be too worried about it. Just be as accurate as you can. And speaking of accurate, look how bad my sewing was on this. It is awful, and I left it in on purpose so you'd feel encouraged and happy. So seriously, in the center of both on the edges, it's bowed out. So there are many solutions to this. One is I could take little seams and sew it so that it was even, but I'm showing you the fast, quick method, which is I'm just gonna cut it off, and those squares on the edges will be not square. They'll be rectangle and they'll go in a little. But there is a quilter saying that if it looks good from a galloping horse, it's good enough. And I don't know who gets credit for saying that in the first place, but whoever said it is brilliant because really it's going to be good enough. It's a doll quilt. So yeah, yes, I could have made it work. I could have taken in some seams and fidgeted with it, but I just decided to show you the slap it on and cut it off method. Here I'm cutting the next border. This border is 2 inches wide, and I love to audition borders even after I've decided to make sure they're what I want. So here you see me measuring because we're going to make the different centers different sizes. So I always measure the borders, press, and then I put the side borders on first, making sure it's exactly correct because we don't want it to pull or push or be the wrong size. So I want it to be square. Here's the top and bottom. I sew those on, and now here is the trick with this. I have directional fabric, so that decided where they went, and I didn't have enough of it. So I added a piece on the top and the bottom to create balance, and I'm going to sew them on like this. So I'm auditioning exactly where they go and exactly how they'll go on. This one has 17 squares by 11 squares in the middle. The original one I made had 14 by 11. You can make this whatever size you want. For the rest of the video, we're going to do the bright colored fabrics that I showed you, and I'm going to teach you a little bit about how I think about color when I put this together. I'm using 17 strips again, and you can see that I'm checking that the two ends can go next to each other and that they'll be pleasing. I'm also, if you look, you can see how separated the yellows are. They stick out a lot. The pinks in the middle have to be separated, and the blues, you just, even though they're different shades of blue, you want them to go at different places as it does this pattern. So you just lay it out, you make it beautiful. Here are our 2 strip sets ready to cut up, and you can see even as they are, they were beautiful. We lay them this way, they look great, so we sew them together to make the center. And this is the best part. I didn't have a camera in my face. Check out, this is more accurate. So you will get good at piecing this. It's just a barely sliver of anything because you can sew accurate seams. You just need to work on it. It's always worth squaring things up when you're working with small pieces because that next border we put on is so straight that if there's crookedness happening, it will show in the border. Here we are with the border on, and now let's talk about color. The blue and the pink are really bright, so I'm putting them at opposite corners to balance each other out. And I chose that corner for the pink because of where the pink is placed in the center. Also, I just decide scrappily where I want this to be. And you can see I'm just cutting it up and getting it ready to sew together. I do the sides first and then the other parts. And I really do look where the piece is in the center to feel where the balance will feel nicest to me. It really is about trusting your gut and trusting your soul. I like the corners to go around the corner. So you can see that I'm doing that in every corner. And here I laid it out, and you can see I have 3 purples, I have 3 yellows, I have greens, 3 of them, and then those opposite each other just to balance. The pinks, there's only 2, but I only needed 2. If you ever feel sad or down, just get out your bright colors and start sewing. It just makes your whole brain light up. Here, this doll quilt is so cute. We wanted to take a minute and thank you for being subscribers. Thank you for all the wonderful comments you leave. I love to read your comments, and I would love to hear your ideas for what you would like in future videos. So know that we read everything you write to us and that we're so grateful for your support. Stay merry and creative.